Welcome to Know the Rules of the Game podcast. I'm your host, Desirée Patno, CEO and President of Women in Housing Real Estate Ecosystem, NAWRB, and Desirée Patno Enterprises, Inc., real estate brokerage, advisor, investor for Amicus Brain Innovations, Inc., and Chief Strategic Officer for Zulu Time, and publisher of NAWRB Magazine and the NAWRB Report. Today, I am so honored to have as our guest, Jasper James, Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of Activism Articulated and the author of Black Bill of Rights, hence Know the Rules of the Game for Black Bill of Rights. Welcome, Jasper.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, very honored to have you. Thank you. So I want to get a little personal before we get into your bio. Tell me a fun fact. She's like, yeah, okay, great. Spring it on me right
now. A fun fact. Well, I think I opened for Debbie Harry.
Oh, yeah. Well, you play 10 musical instruments. That's crazy. That's like, name all 10.
Oh boy. Okay. Every saxophone. So that's soprano, alto, tenor, bari. Then I also play drums.
Okay.
I play guitar. I play bass. I kind of quasi do clarinet, flute, and then I sing. And well, the percussion takes up a lot of different stuff. So I play drums, actual drums, but then I also play percussion hand instruments. So
how cool is that? Well, my father used to play sax and I used to play the cello. So we kind of got in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting. That's exciting. Okay, so let's get into her bio. It's really cool. Jasper has worked for nearly 15 years as a community activist, artist, and facilitator. They co-founded 2 active Facebook groups back in 2015, one for Allies of Black Lives Matter, which holds over 15,000 members and is dedicated to discussion and education centered on racial justice. Additionally, they have pioneered a project focused on social justice and spirituality. As a co-founder of Activism Articulated, a crisis and PR firm located in Sacramento, yes, the state of California, they are one of the only advocacy communications firms run by queer, mixed-race women of color and provide media training and crisis counseling for organizations nationwide. Very cool. From their past as a Billboard recording artist and event producer to her most recent status as a reg organizer director for the 2020 Mike Bloomberg campaign that went up in a heap. I mean, that was stress. Could imagine. Like overnight, hey, we're doing this. We're going to give you $150 billion or $1 million a month on advertising. I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Anyway, a whole nother story. Jasper is a digital campaign rapid response strategist with strong public relations and project management skills. During their tenure as president of the Women's March Sacramento chapter, Ms. James also co-founded Women's March Blanc, an all-Black branch of Women's March National Leadership. Welcome, welcome up. This is so incredible. And I know you had a little bit less on this. Oh, here you go. She's also an active member of the ACLU Sacramento Chapter Board, the Sacramento Stonewall Democratic Club PAC, and the ACL Speakers Bureau, and the newly formed AB 392 Oversight Committee, which was passed in 2019 and is active in 2020. So talk to me about a little about, before we go into setting the stage, of what the AB 392 is.
So that was a bill that was introduced by Shirley Weber, and also Kevin McCarty was also pretty significant supporter of that bill as well. And that was basically put together after Stephon Clark was shot here in Sacramento by SacPD. And it's essentially, it's a use of force bill. And so it's basically setting the foundation of what has to be reasonable, you know, because the definition is in the reasonable.
Very wide base.
It is, yeah, exactly, right. So so that was passed, and then it went into effect in 2020. And now, just like everything that we have to do with Sacramento police, unfortunately, we always have to do something that deals with oversight. Because if we don't do oversight, then they just, it's like the Wild West over here, pretty much.
You know, I think that's a lot of different industries, a lot of different communities. It's accountability. If you don't have accountability, you can have the biggest money thrown at a project, and yet if the follow through is not there, it means nothing. It's just like thrown in the wind. It's like, why waste the time, money, and energy if you're not going to do anything on it? You're not going to act on it, right? And change for the better good. All right, so let's go ahead and set the stage. So earlier this year in 2020, NAWRB came in with the NAWRB Diversity Inclusion Leadership Council, and we curated out of these incredible ladies that are senior executive women in all different industries, and we came up with the 10 women leadership principles to help women in the real estate and housing ecosystem become more effective leaders and empower other women to reach their full potential. And I really was inspired when Erica Courtney sits on our NDLC, introduced me to Darcy, then she introduced me to you. And the power of our conversations just out of the blues went to where you have to meet Jasper. And here we are from last week to this week. We're like moving it, right? We've got to get it down. So
time. No, we don't waste any time.
Time is now. It could not have happened at a more opportune time to have the audience of the United States and the globe listening to what we're talking about and how we're talking it. And as my youngest son would say, of the four, he goes, Mom, it doesn't matter what you say if they don't do something on it. They don't act on it. You've got to have it, from as simple as a podcast to a conference, speaking around the country every week. I'd get on a plane every week and go talk and let them know about the leverage of resources. And this is so powerful. So let's set the stage. The Black Bill of Rights was your version 2 years ago. And how did it become and why?
Well, so as I mentioned, Stephon Clark was a unarmed, innocent Black man who was shot in his grandparents' backyard while he was trying to go home. And that experience, this is what I want, I always tell allies to understand is that, every time we see a Black person getting shot, that's like our cousin, that's like our father or our uncle. And it never changes. Like that feeling that you feel when you turn on your TV and you see another police officer killing an unarmed Black person. I can't even describe that feeling because I know that they're going to go free. For the most part, I'd say 99.9% of the time they're going to go free. So our business, we started off as a regular PR communications firm. We were kind of full service boutique. We did everything from like press releases, your basic stuff, red carpets, and stuff like that. But then when the No Dapple happened, where Standing Rock, we ended up working on that campaign, and we worked with the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. And then from there, it was kind of like our niche market shifted. Right. So we shifted from being full service to pretty much doing crisis management full time. And then that's how we ended up being on the front lines for Stephon Clark. So we were there in a professional capacity. So in that space, I've never experienced anything like this before because I was in the space as a professional, and I'm a queer person of color, but my voice was not in that room because of the fact that I was there in a professional capacity.
Right.
So it was a very, it was a trying time because I had never been so up close to something that was so visceral and so tragic and awful.
Yeah.
And then also having to deal with it as a person of color, right? So I went through the process, stayed professional, did everything that we had to do. And then, it was our time was over. We did what we had to do. But then I was left with this huge impact in my life because I really started to understand what was happening. This is it. It wasn't just about, well, why don't we just go after the cops? Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, why don't we? And then it just like sparked this 2-year obsession of really getting down to the bottom of why killer cops go free. Like I was a dog with a bone. No one could stop me.
Right.
And so my wheelhouse for what I do for my business is large viral worthy campaigns, right?
Love it.
So I started to build the premise of what do I have to do right now? What do I have to understand to be able to get the mass to understand what's happening here? Because it wasn't just cut and dry like everyone was trying to tell us it was. I was like, it can't be this cut and dry where
Like you flip the switch.
right, like, yeah, like we see people getting shot on video and then all of a sudden we get the same thing after a certain period of time. You see the DA stand up and say, well, we're not going to press charges. And I'm just like, why do we even go through this process in the first place? They had to have known they weren't going to press charges from the very beginning. Right. And so that's essentially like what I found out. And so the 2 years marked me going, you know, researching everything from Black history, you know, going back into the Constitution, understanding what our protections and rights should be compared to what they were. And then there were like a lot of things that kind of unraveled as that happened, because I started to see that what we've come to understand as history is so off the mark.
Right.
And it's off the mark because the winners write history, right? So they put up their statues, they put in whatever they want to put in the textbooks.
Yeah.
They create the messaging, and then they do whatever they can to basically erase what happened. And so that's what I started to uncover. You know, personally myself, like, I'm not saying that no one else uncovered these things, right, but it was really kind of a methodical thing, because that's the other fact. I'm a scientist by nature. So I just research stuff, and I'm always trying to just figure out what it is, right? So that's what kind of led me to understanding that that it was important to do a Black Bill of Rights, because Bill of Rights exists. It's nothing new. I mean, we have Consumer Bill of Rights. We even have a Victims Bill of Rights. You know, so in case, you know, listeners don't know, Bill of Rights actually create a protection within a protection.
Perfect.
And so once I started to understand what actually turned into be understanding a diabolical, like, undermining of the rights that Black people and protections that we had under the law on paper were being undermined in every generation. So, you know, like, slavery was abolished, but because Lincoln was assassinated, it fell apart. So within the year of slavery being abolished, it was essentially reinstated, except in a different way based on other laws that were put into effect after he was assassinated. And it's basically been like that ever since. So from the 1700s, that's what I know of. Like, I only went back that far. So from the 1700s. Right.
Before Christ, you know. See, what your projection is so powerful, because you're connecting the dots. You're analytically curating and putting the information down, so it's and I don't want to sell it short, but you're actually seeing why it's connected with, and leaving the emotion checked for a while, so you can read the statistics, you can understand what happened as a chain of events, and say, no matter what, this is not right. And that's what's so powerful with having a Black Bill of Rights, or any research that you can quantitatively say, this is why we're having an issue, and not isolate it particularly, because once you talk about an event, you emotionally get charged. Well, you know, it could have been, it should have been, and this was a different, and you become, you lose the audience when you can't segregate the connection of this is a pattern. And that's what I love about what you did. You talked about previously on our pre-call of do the podcast that you curated, hundreds, 200, I believe it was the number of families that you went through and analyzed it. And that's what makes this so unique and so powerful, is because you have the research to go with it. It's not just, hey, there's 4 or 5 and that kind of just, went with the flow. What happened this week or this month or this year? You've been doing this way before we got into the environment we have.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing was too, is that I'm very fortunate to have access to a lot of professionals because of the different board seats that I'm on, and just, you know, the work that I have and the standing that my partner and my wife have within our community. So I had the ability to tap a lot of people to help me kind of, you know, make sense of it, because I understood it was so big. And originally, like, how it started was that there were three things that I wanted to achieve. And that was basically like the framework that I kind of like, okay, well, we need somewhere to start. So the first place was what I received from the families, which was when I asked them a question of, you know, how did it affect them? Like, how are they still affected now? And the conversation always came back to one thing, and it was the conversation about not feeling safe. And the fact that our white peers, not only do they have a safety that we've never known as people of color, specifically Black people, but they take advantage of and enjoy, like, just kind of like, yeah, well, we have protections, right? So that was really what was another jump off point for me, was because I was like, okay, so you always hear people say we have two systems of government, right? But it really is true. And that's what this whole process had me understand, where we have allowed two systems to occur. Because if you see, when you understand like history and the premise of what the Constitution was written under, the premise of it, the premise of the Bill of Rights, you know, the original, the premise was that Black people were never supposed to be free. And so that the protections that were in place or put into place by the founding fathers was only supposed to be between two people: the ruling class, white men, and the white working class, or people who owned land. So, you know, it made sense that if someone was in the highest rung of our government and decided that they wanted to go, you know, sideways and become a traitor or treasonous, that it was going to be a lot easier for that to happen, right? Because you had white men approaching other white men and saying, okay, you're not doing this right, fix it, right? Or we're just going to overthrow you. And that was what I started to really understand, was that because Black people were not seen as human. And what that really means, because people say it, you know, we've just become accustomed to saying it like, oh, Black people were considered to be 3/5 of a person. Well, do you really understand what that means? Because it means a lot more than what you think it means.
Right.
And the shady part of it was the only reason why we got that 3/5 was not for us. It was for the ruling class. Because the slave owners had so many slaves, they needed a way to be able to make their slaves count. So we didn't even get rights based on the fact that we were human beings. We got rights because they made us think that because they had so many slaves in their possession, that they should be able to count somehow. That's why we got rights. That's why we got rights as people, right? So when you start
to learn that in school,
that's the thing. That was really the key. Was just like, all of these conversations are missing context. They're missing the nuances of the history itself. So like when you read a history book, it's facts and figures, dates and times, and who was involved and what happened, but it doesn't provide the overall context of what was in place at that moment in history. And that's what, it's just, this happened and then this happened, but it's like, no, well, this happened, but then all of this happened at the same time. Like, you don't hear people really say with conviction that slavery was basically reinstated the same year that it was abolished. Like, people don't usually say that, but it's true.
If you were to look at something that was, you look at the Me Too movement, on the fact is that how has it really changed? And we look at the Black Lives Matter or the social racism that's going on, or you've got to look at, say, did it really make a difference just from the women's point of view, or women of color? have we actually moved anywhere in 20 years? So we've got to do it right this time for the Black community to make sure, and not only for the Black community, but for life in itself, that we all are better. One of the most prime examples right now, if you think about, look at Hidden Treasures. Here's Katherine Johnson. There would be people that the space program would not be where it is today if she didn't say, I'm better than a computer. I'm better than any human being. And if she didn't put herself out to not have access to a simple thing as a bathroom, have access to, I got fired, I got misplaced, I got thrown out. And oh, by the way, I need you to save them coming back into reentry, and you got 2 minutes to figure it out. Are you kidding? I mean, obviously exaggeration, but history would not be where it's today. And in addition to our advancements, considering how incredible, you look at our sports, you look at our musicians, you look at the caliber of so many different things. If we don't, and what you've had to go through to get there based on just being, oh yeah, it's here. All the other economic things that go with it. So that's what I love about this piece, is that whether you love it or not, our listeners and the people, the more we show them the path, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think that's, like I said, just to circle back, the premise of the Black Bill of Rights started off as something, which was connected to, like I said, so safety, right? Because all of the families, that was the thing that stayed with them, was like, once you see that the people that are supposed to be protecting you will kill your loved one, and then there's no repercussions. And then on top of it, your community continues to pay for those people to have their pensions, to basically get a paid vacation. All they're really doing is just sitting on the sidelines and waiting until they know the obvious, which is that they're going to go free. They might not be able to get back out on the streets in their neighborhood, but they're going to be able to get a job someplace else, and they're still going to get their pensions. So I think the families played a huge role in me striving and pushing and continuing to really understand what the Black Bill of Rights could be, because once you feel that, once you understand that, it's just like, you really can't trust anyone. And it's on such a public level, so not only did you lose your loved one, but now the media is spinning the messaging that they smoked a little weed, or they hit somebody 15 years ago, and so on top of everything else, then your loved one's getting trashed on top of it. And so that was really the first thing that I said, okay, how do we keep Black people safe?
Change the narrative, get it going. So, and you highlight 3, and you have between your legislative memos, a series of memos, ready ideas to be presented as individual bills to be made into laws. You talk about those 3 different things. And I think that one of the most powerful things you said so far, and the explanation of it is that you were able to get these families to open up about their inner thoughts. Here you came in and said, I need you to tell me everything that's going to help create the narrative to, can't change what happened at the moment, but give me time to help curate this information, bring this information, so we can have a seat at the table to hopefully make it better as your children grow up, as your relatives grow, and as a society, we can embrace change and say, we did this, that it wasn't just done and forgotten, right? We've seen that in the entertainment industry. We've seen that in, things are going back that the statute of limitations is 3 years, 5 years, 10 years for certain things. And we're seeing people go back 30, 40, 50 years now. And you're just like, you said something, you did something 30 years ago, and now it's in the news, right? And it's happening so fast. So you have the attention. So if you could talk about a little bit of that, as far as your different 3 proposals before we get in a real one, I think it'd be really, it could really elevate that continuing conversation.
So you want to talk about the 3 pieces, right? Is that?
I think it's your gig. I think that you have it so well laid out. I mean, you talk about the BB&R legislative memos, the proposal to what is about to go through the articles, and then we can jump right into Rule 1. I think that would be exceptionally powerful.
All right, so the legislation and the memo aspect of all of this was really what I understood to be necessary to keep Black communities safe. And so I took it from the 2019 California report of the, recommendations of what needs to happen, right? That's kind of like, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use this on top of it. So I was already still I was still working. I did a lot of interviewing, but it was very organic. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, okay, we're going to sit down, I'm going to take these notes. It was really more about the fact that I was just like, this is what I'm working with. This is what I want to achieve. And so, I didn't do this alone by any means. There were so many people who believed in the idea and the premise of it. So they helped me to kind of formulate what that could potentially look like. So with the memos and the legislation, that was directly connected to the articles, right? So the articles are important because for me, the articles are the key to disrupting. So for instance, if a family goes through the awful things that, George Floyd's family just went through, the whole premise would be to get this to them. And it does a couple of things. Now, I don't like to call it a sweet spot, but there's a sweet spot that you have in a media cycle, which typically runs from 24 hours to 72 hours.
Right.
And in that 72-hour span, that family could essentially ask for anything. And they never do. Right. And so I understand why they don't. They don't because they're devastated. I mean, just think about it. People have a hard time when they lose loved ones, period.
Right.
Especially when it's like something that, it's not grandma who's been sick for 10 years and finally she's ready to go. It's not, and even that's hard, but this is a whole other like realm of trauma that these families are experiencing. And so you're looking at it from the perspective of, if we could get this to these families within that 72-hour span, this could be their ask. And so that's very important.
Okay, I get it.
Because then in that ask, they're also going to get the information that comes with the articles, which is where it's been done, the legislation that has been passed in other states, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. But they're also going to understand the premise of why cops go free. And I think that that's really the piece that's been missing with the families, is that there's so much grief and there's so much trauma that they can't even think about that. And that information is not readily available, folks. They are not trying to display or amplify what's going on behind closed doors with your local politicians and police unions. They're not trying to highlight any of that. And there is a reason why when they do those things, the community doesn't know about it, right? So that's really the important part of that. And then there was a third and final piece, which was I actually studied all the different types of police bills of rights out there, the law enforcement officers' bill of rights, right? But we call it POBAR for short, police officers' bill of rights. So the police officers' bill of rights has a series of leniencies interwoven into it. Now it's an administrative document.
Okay.
Basically it's the conversation of if you did something wrong, you need to be disciplined. These are the things that have to be taken care of. This is protocol. So it's a protocol document. But the interesting things about the police officers' bill of rights is that there are leniencies injected into that administrative document that don't have to be. They're put in there.
Right.
Because they are essentially making sure that there is a group of people that are getting protections that are above the law. So the police bill of rights is not constitutional. There's only 15 states within our entire nation that has a police bill of rights, but that's because of the fact that usually it's not needed because of the police union contracts. So whatever's the police bill of rights is essentially like a 3 or 4 page document that just outlines stuff for protocol, right? But it's the police union contracts where it gets the nitty gritty. They start to get into it. So the police bill of rights and the union contracts work together. And then it's usually within the police union contracts where you see stipulations like you can't have a oversight committee. Like, it's in the union contract.
No accountability. Sorry.
Yeah, really. Yeah, you can't have that. Or if you do have, if you are able to have a committee, oversight committee, they have no power. Other things like, usually that's where the qualified immunity language comes in.
Right.
So, and qualified immunity has really been in the news a lot lately, which I'm happy about. I was really mad that they were just like, we're not going to overturn it, because that's the premise. It's these particular documents. There are other things that happen too that are shady, but are these documents that are essentially set it up for any police officer who's done anything wrong can get away with it, including the murder of innocent lives. That's part of the reason why they couldn't bring in Breonna Taylor, her killers, because qualified immunity essentially states that if someone is doing their job, they can't get penalized for it, no matter what happens. So the reason why they didn't bring in those cops is because technically, I can pretty much guarantee, no, don't quote me, but I can pretty much guarantee that the reason why they didn't bring them in was because they have qualified immunity in their police union contract. So there was no reason to pull them in because they didn't do anything wrong.
Based on, your own, right, the rules written by them for them.
They technically didn't do anything wrong. The problem with this is that your political leaders, right, the people who renegotiate these contracts, are essentially giving up their citizens. Like, that's what's happening. They're basically saying, okay, well, we're going to just say that you're not going to kill any of our citizens, right? So we're going to let it slide within our contracts that, if something does happen, there'll be a slap on the wrist, like, your guys will be good. And then that's where the campaign financing conversation comes in, because the police union contracts give a ton of money to people. It's a huge conflict of interest. And so these are the things that, like, if I could reach every single family that's ever lost a loved one in that 72 hours, these are the things that they need to know. They need to know them. They need to understand how the sausage, for all intents and purposes, how it works.
You're giving them the cookbook,
exactly,
and the guidelines to understand this is what they're thinking. You're thinking this is what you can and cannot do, and this is where it's going. So every moment that this happened, from the time it happened, is critical. So you need to spend da-da-da-da-da-da. It's like you said, you can't have a lead go cold. You have to have it on point, get it going. And I'm so, as I'm hearing you talk about the different things and the accessibility and understanding, it's so critical, especially in today's market, that utilizing that prime time of 72 hours, like you said, that you can ask for anything and not know that you can ask for anything. I know that Beyonce just a couple of days ago asked for, why hasn't anything been done about Breonna Taylor? Here, she's a woman, a Black woman, is laying in her bed and went to the wrong house. Oh, woe is me. Nope.
Oh, well.
It's nothing else. Just them coming out and publicly apologizing and say, we're sorry. Not that that cures anything, but at least that's an effort. There's been no effort, even to apply it. So, at some point, and I love what you're talking about, how the Police Bill of Rights, calling the LEOBR, the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, how you're talking about having a checklist, a toolbox, a navigational guidebook, we'll call it, based on it, saying, I understand the grieving and everything else. And so maybe not the actual spouse or mother or daughter or direct heir or direct family member, but someone else who can take the time to read it. So to be that, guiding light to help instigate it, I think is huge. So thank you for that, for setting that framework. So if we go into, the purpose of the rules of the game is really to bring the 3 rules on how can we help, the availability of the information that we're providing, because no longer, that was the whole premise for the rules of the game being trademarked last year, is if you know the rules of the game, you can play the game no matter what. And you're giving the rule book so they can play the game, and not that we're minimizing the conversation, but we're saying we understand, but you need to know now in case you're put in this position that you have that available to you, right? And hopefully you never, and our goal is to never to have it to where it becomes less and less and we become, right? Mm-hmm. So love, love, love. So let's get down to rule number 1. You say it's educate yourself. Lead all families who have lost innocent loved ones by the hands of police to these documents. Define that.
Mm-hmm. So the premise of educating yourself is to understand, again, there's the way that the sausage is made, and then there's the way that the sausage presents itself, right? Because you don't know what goes into making the sausage. You don't want to really know, but you see the sausage in a nice package,
right?
And it looks great, and you can't wait to get it on the barbecue. It's it's like that is what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the nitty-gritty of what these contracts mean. And it's so important for these families to understand that this is not, when they're going into this whole process of like filing, a complaint, starting the procedure to go to trial, go to court, preliminaries, like all of this stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. Usually the families, based on what I can tell, it doesn't seem like this. I've spoken to them. I've spoken to enough, I feel, to say this with confidence, but I could be wrong. I always preface it that they didn't really have any idea about what was happening in these contracts because no one talked about it. Right? So they just have a lawyer that comes in and tells them what to do and what steps they need to take. And remember, we know the MO, right? These families are often they're poverty stricken, right? So when you find someone who's basically going to be like, hey, you know what, you'll probably make $1 million off of this thing, you're going to be inclined to listen to that person and just follow their lead. And I totally get that, I do. But the disconnect there is that the people who were also telling them that they should just follow their lead are not explaining to them that probably the reason why those cops are going to go free is because of whatever is in these contracts. So these conversations are not being had from the lawyers who are taking up their cases, to then you have like a mayor of a town or of a city who says, well, we're going to do whatever we can to seek justice, but they already sold you out when they signed the contract. So whatever is in that contract, and God forbid you try to find it, like pretty much it's supposed to be a matter of public record, but it's very difficult to find. It's very, you have to basically request to see what's in those documents. And so the families are going through this process like that. So that's why the education is so key, because you have got to understand a couple of things. One, does your local politician take contributions from the police union?
Right.
Because if they do, that means that there's a huge conflict of interest. And it's probably giving you the understanding that they've allowed something to exist in these contracts that shouldn't be there. And that's really the biggest thing that I want families to understand, and Black people to understand, everybody to understand right now, that when your local leader signs these contracts, they understand that they are signing away your constitutional rights. They understand. So, and these are the things that they never discuss. So it goes without saying. I mean, you have to educate yourself about the bottom line of how your political community and infrastructure is working.
Got it.
Because that's going to give you the first ability to counteract what's about to happen, because that's what needs to happen right now. We actually have to disrupt the system, and then highlight what's wrong with the system at the same time. So that's why when I'm saying you have that 24 to 72 hour window, that's so crucial. That's because those families can put the mayor who signed that contract, or whoever signed that contract, on notice, saying that we're coming after you because we want to know what you signed. We want to know what was in your police union contract. Do you have POBAR? We want to know what's in that contract. Right. Because if you know from that very beginning what's in that contract, then your lawyer can tell you that you might win.
A question, is there a federal police bill of rights, and are there local bill of rights, or is just there one bill of rights? And as you talked before, there was an overlay of how it meshes with current bill of rights for a county, let's say, or city or state. Is there individual interpretation? Because that you hear now where in one county or one state, certain force of action is no longer legal, and because just here in California, where both of us are based, one is southern, one northern. But the ability to have the high concentration of people, the ability to have the geographical area to get to the people for help can vary very different between different parts of the United States. So is there a difference between them, or is there just one set across?
So the very first police bill of rights was created here in California and enacted by Jerry Brown in 1976. Yeah.
Really? Didn't know that.
Yeah, so womp womp with Jerry Brown. But all
right, no politics. We're talking. Good.
So, but the thing is that he set a precedent with that enactment. And so
wow, I had no idea.
What the precedent that he set was that if you enacted, or if you decided to have a police bill of rights in your state, that you're essentially taking away the constitutional rights of your citizens, and that your police officers actually have more rights than the citizens that they are supposed to be maintaining safety for. And that's really the bottom line. That's what it is. And that's not what you hear people talk about when you're talking about the police bill of rights, really. That's the core. The core is that these things might have little variations. Like, there's only 15 states that have a police bill of rights, like I mentioned, but it's not a constitutional document, and there's nothing saying or stating that it can't be overturned. It can be.
Well, there's the things that having that information, because, the states right now are very much being driven by their own desires based on the pandemic and everything that's going on. So you see a whole environment of, I'm no longer going to be the cheerleader. I got to do what's best for me and best for my country and best for my, my community. And if you're going to live in shelter in place, work, and what infrastructure, it's so important that if you think about real estate, you live in an area that supports your ideology, supports who you are and what you are, to make sure that you have access to quality of life. And this is really what this whole thing is that making sure that everyone, and making sure, especially obviously the Black Bill of Rights, that as soon as the day they breathe air to the day they die, that they understand how they can hopefully case by case, and then from the being at the seat at the table, change it together, right? From all different angles. So excellent. So if we go on to rule number 2, be solution oriented. Confront your local leaders and pressure them to stand in full support of Black lives. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the community who suffers from these deaths, they have a unique, I hate to call it opportunity, but it really is. It's an opportunity to hold your local leaders to task.
Okay.
And so again, it's educate yourself. That was rule 1. So you're educating yourself about what your local government is doing behind the scenes. Do they have a police bill of rights? If so, what does it say? Your police union contract, what's in the police union contract? Are there things in that contract that are specifically taking your rights away as citizens? And I will say with 100%, yes. That's why these documents exist, right? So then from there, that's your next action. That's the reason why you have to be solution oriented, because you have to pull yourself out of the emotion,
right,
of this
that's
moment.
so hard. Oh my gosh.
And it's so, yeah, I mean, that's why you do have to have someone who is representing the family, someone who can take up the responsibility of moving in this space for the family. And so this is the most important thing right here, because you can ask in that 72 hours. That family can say, where are the receipts?
Right.
Show me the receipts. What did you sign? We need to know, so that we can move through this process more enlightened, with more understanding of what's possible and what's not possible. Instead of going a year waiting for the outcome of some kind of suit, I can tell you how that suit's going to pan out if we read the police bill of rights, if they have one, or their police union contract. We don't have to even go down that road. That is a year's worth of taxpayers' money for no reason. Because if you know what's in that contract, there's no reason to even go down this road. You know that those protections are in place, and that you going through this process of trying to bring justice, it's not going to happen.
The correlation that you can bring to the financial institutions and the knowing the bank, what they allow and not versus a credit union, how their bill of rights and laws of whether the money's yours or theirs. These are the things that, again, amplifying, knowing what your rights are, understanding what the rights that are in place, because if it's already in place, you're going to have a wasted time, energy, and money. Now, even if you know that the Bill of Rights are there, and let's say from the police force or law enforcement officers, and you know that it's not on your side, the more you bring the awareness of this event happen, and you have someone who can help be that, I'm not going to say diary, but be that organizer of events. And the more you can connect and say, this is a pattern, this is why. It's like the old adage where they don't put a stoplight at a street corner until someone's died or multiple people have died. Right. So the idea has to be that we have a way of collecting the data, so you can say, no, this is not an isolated case. This has been happening to, one is too much. But from an unemotional data collection, it'll help build the case. And that's why this is so powerful. So thank you. All right, so if we go down to rule number 3, believe in the realm of possibility and to the current list and create your own. Kind of leads into what I was talking about.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, as you just pointed out, this is not just about the judicial or the justice system, right? These things are happening in every single sector, in every single system that we live in, right? So there are ways that undermine our citizenship that are built into the law. So that even though we should be receiving these laws, again, on paper, it looks great, right? Yay, those things pass. But then when if there's no oversight, there's no, like, real estate, right?
Accountability. Yeah.
There's like very little, what is it? I'm gonna forget the term now.
Follow
Not,
through.
no, it's when you're, it's kind of like oversight, but there's a different term for it.
Accountability.
Yeah, it's something like that, but it's like, oh, it's when you're like, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
That's okay. This is a heavy subject.
But so you're basically looking at how you can shift what's occurring.
Mm.
And
You're basically what you're doing is the momentum, the drive. You're changing the narrative. You're disrupting the thought, and it's like when we talked before the podcast was why now? Captive audience, everything's burnt out, Netflix is gone, you're like over there's no new sports, nothing going on to it. So you have the ability to bring a new narrative, a new story, and a different way that's going to spark one more, 10,000 more, 100,000 more, 1,000,000 more people to see the light and the vision on why it's an issue and why it's so imperative that we all, no matter what side of the fence you're on, that you join together to make this difference, because in no way, shape, or form in 2020, let's be the year to make that difference, right? Because we have the curation of data. And if you analyze that 90% of the data is changing every year, that's for the entire globe.
Yeah.
And this is the time to take that data, curate it, and say, okay, next year, 2021, we're going to be on the path to fixing it. We all know it can't happen overnight. It's humanity.
Yeah.
But let's not let it happen to what happened to the Me Too movement or any of the other movements before us, no matter what the movement is, to say that we can check a box and go, it has been steadily going up the right way, like the coronavirus, going up the right way, that we're making a difference versus then being, okay, that's great, you brought the data, but I didn't get enough reaction and communication and deliverables and accountability. And I believe that enough industries, people, exposure of to like you said, the 72 hours pivotal, most important. It's like, the difference of a heart attack. Those few seconds of being able to change the direction of your heart or the pulsation of it is a difference of life and death. Absolutely. I believe the same, that the difference of those moments can be the difference of whether you can help someone and prevent it, in addition to help change that this isn't right. And you've got to say and change the narrative to where it sinks in and not just being whoa, and just glossed over.
Well, yeah, because we're basically told across the board, right, that we should believe in justice, right? Oh, the word was deregulation. That's
got it. Yes.
And so, there are varying levels of justice for the citizens of this nation. We've seen this. We've seen that this is true, right?
Right.
And so the reason why this is so devastating is because then it is compounded by implicit bias and white supremacist oppressive systems that are the actual container of these things. And so the container of white supremacy is dubious. These are the same people that basically made genocide okay to build this nation, right? They dehumanized an entire groups of people so that they can build this nation and then create their wealth on our backs. We've never received any type of, no rectifying anything that's happened. And so that's the part of history that's so essential to this conversation and to this narrative, is because people have got to understand the historic premise of what we're living in today. This is because they set a precedent. the lawmakers set a precedent that no matter what we have on paper, they can always just come right behind us and do something else without us even knowing. And it will literally take us 10 to 20 to 30 years for us to understand collectively that this is what they've done, right? So that's the biggest part of why I think this is so important, because what the Black Bill of Rights ended up becoming, because it evolved, of course, over the 2 years of span. Like there was those three basic things, I think, were the way that I could say right away that, if we install these three things, if we do these three things, that we can create safety for our Black communities all over the nation, all across the nation.
Critical.
Right. So, but that was part of the reason why it evolved to actually include other sectors. Right. So it's really about now, how do we look at it in terms of like persistent injustices everywhere? So in places like healthcare, in places like housing, in places like education,
Right.
like this is a conversation about how you could really create a system of reparations that doesn't require a check. This is, if you have $100 million to give to your police department to basically militarize them,
Right.
then you should have enough money to put a certain amount of your budget aside, when there's a budget, for the reparations of the Black people in your area and what that can look like. And ultimately, that's what the Black Bill of Rights is. The Black Bill of Rights is taking us out of the white supremacist container and putting us into the Black Bill of Rights container that offers justice for everyone. Because this isn't just about white and Black. This is about the fact that there is a ruling class and then there's poor people. This is a class issue as well.
I totally agree. In the class amplification, we believe that the economic footprint of the unbanked, underutilized of the banking in the financial industry, get some water here, is so important that you compound that to the amount of money and resources and time that's spent to that 72 hours. That correlation is so important, because I believe they're integrated so heavily, because when you don't have the rule book, you don't understand to the level of how the whole media or legislative or community works, because of lack of
transparency
space, right? And then especially if you're a single parent on top of that, you're dealing with possibly health issues, and you're dealing with cancer, you're dealing with other different health impact that go with it. There's so much your mind can take.
Right.
We're seeing that during the pandemic, that people are becoming mentally overloaded. And this adds to this whole crisis, right?
Absolutely.
So incredible. So rule number 3, believe in the realm of possibility and create your own list. We talked about that. Sorry, we're going back to rule number 3 again. So with that being said, we finalize that. We have rule number 1, educate yourself. Rule number 2, be solution oriented. And rule number 3, believe in the realm of possibility. I believe that is that you can have a vision of owning a home, not be subjective to redlining, which is the territorial of where you're buying a home, where you should charge higher interest rates or higher premiums for everything goes down to it. You're never gonna be equal. Whether you're gonna have the right, not the right, but you're going to have a same quality of police help in case of an emergency, something, the fire department, whatever, between the different communities. Do you build the fire station here versus not? All those things. And that's why we're so involved in social impact and knowing what the community has of infrastructure, right? As an organization. And you put these all into play, you're going to curate you're only strong as your weakest link. And if that's the police not having the too much opportunity to do as and have you know, a different flavor, but then you have a judicial system that's amplifying that because they go hand in hand, like you say, conflict of interest. Then you have the financial institutions that are playing into that. And then you have the community oversight that is being controlled by the funds and where they're going within corporations and who's doing what to it. You know, you see what's going on in the ads and the biggest social media platforms, and I'm pulling it, and once one starts, everyone does, but no one wants to be that first, you know, being that first to say it's not okay. And I believe that by having the Black Bill of Rights is, if you look at it, to our listeners and to everyone who's going to follow us, you've got to look at it with an open mind and say, this is about education of understanding what's in play. And if you remove the word Black, and if you remove the word woman in, like we do our principles, and just read the facts, and then apply Black, and then apply women, or apply whatever class, economic class, then you have the opportunity of getting into the inner core of people to get them to go through the process. So I love your 72-hour of media. I think that is such a huge, powerful point.
Well, and you know, I just like to interject, you know, with the 72 hours, that's like for the families. But I mean, in terms of moving through all of these different sectors, like I said, you know, like housing and real estate and healthcare, you know, it's not, it doesn't have to be the 72 hours. It's more about the fact that it's a group of things that you can do. You know what I mean? So it can, for the families, it's crucial that they do something in that 72 hours. But in terms of, like, if you were looking to see how you would be able to shift these infrastructures from the white supremacist infrastructure to the Black Bill of Rights infrastructure, this is more about the fact that it's like, okay, we first need to come together as a community. That's why I say to be open to the realm of possibility, because I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine, and she could not wrap her mind around the fact that this conversation that we were having about the Black Bill of Rights didn't have anything to do with the white supremacist structures that were already in play. Like, I had to drag her to understand, like, because she kept going back to it. She kept looping back, and I was like, stop. I was like, that's what this is all about. This is about disrupting, going back to that system, believing in a realm of possibility, and then seeing what we can envision together as a community, you know, as a state, as a country. Like, this is where we are now. We have to reimagine what it looks like for this to actually be a world that works, or a nation that works for everyone. We've never done that before. We never took a step back to, like, right the wrongs that were done, and we just kind of, like, covered them up. And, you know, now people say, oh, you had a Black president, and we had 44 white presidents. I'm like, so what?
A whole nother podcast.
It's like, you know, let's all sing Kumbaya because we had one Black president. No.
Well, I love the fact that if we spell it out to the podcast, we've got to look at this as that just because we did it that way before, it does not mean that's the right way, and we need to continue. So in everything in life, you're supposed to, and I love to use the analogy of my parents, is that our parents were supposed to be better than our grandparents. We're supposed to be better than our parents, and we're supposed to raise our children to be better than us. So the progression is that we as a society need to improve and get better. That's not just from the fourth industrial revolution of technology. That's not from the access to money, or just access to, you know, a way of flying around the world, which, guess what, you don't get to do anymore, but for the right thing. But it's the way of saying that I need to be a better individual. I need to be a better human being, because now I understand what happened 200 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 50 years ago. And if we as a society can open our minds and not say, we've done it this way, I'm not going to change, regardless of political power, regardless of left and right, we then as a whole win. And I believe the Black Bill of Rights will be succession and be successful because of it. And so I agree, the 72 hours is for the family. How long would you believe that would be the sweet spot for the curation of data? Are we looking at 6 months? Are we looking for a year? Are we just going to put it into a database? Have we talked about that to where you have this in closing, you have this database of, you say, organically being collected and information being curated. Where would we want to send our information if we believe that we've seen something, we've been victimized, we know information that we want to contribute to your services?
Well, I mean, the premise of the Black Bill of Rights, like I said, is to evolve it into any sector that oppresses, right? So we know that every sector, every system oppresses us, right? Because the premise, the container of white supremacy is meant to do that. And that's the reason why we're in the position that we're in, right? Because the people who are really like making the rules and you know, making sure that there's deregulation of oil, deregulation of real estate. So, you know, people are getting rich, right? So, and then these people are getting rich and then they're also giving to campaigns. So when we're looking at how we start to disrupt that process, the disruption starts on a local level.
Okay.
And because if we can make our local level, our local community stronger, and we hold our local leaders to task, we have a better chance at actually being able to move through each of these sections, right? So I'll say, like I just mentioned, what are the main things that have to shift, right?
Okay.
So I would say personal financing, right? Understanding how to save for your pensions, having access to personal wealth, being able to be set up so that you can create generational wealth for yourself, real estate, right? So that's one. Healthcare and all the things that come with healthcare, right?
Well,
right. Then you have your justice system, judicial system. Then you have, let me see what else. What's a big one too? Education.
Right.
So let's say, right. Okay. So and then, you know, personal financial aspects that also comes with entrepreneurship, right? Okay. So this is helping folks to build their own businesses, build their own wealth. So I'd say that there's like these are the big buckets,
right?
But we have to start looking at it from the bucket. And then what happens within each of these buckets? Where do the injustices occur? You know, like let's break down the face value and really start to see what happens in the housing, you know, and real estate.
Absolutely.
What you know, what's the stuff that's sideways there? And so these are, I honestly, for me, it looks like a think tank. It looks like a huge think tank where you have the best minds with each bucket come together and say, okay, where's the person who has the data for education? How many Black kids are being able to graduate from high school? How many Black kids were able to like get the appropriate education going from preschool to kindergarten, from the 1st to the 5th grade? Like it will take that amount of like fortitude and focus.
I started to go total focus. No, I hear you, and it's exuberating of going, you were on the same wavelength of saying you've got to break it down simple terms, that it's the silos or the buckets, we call it silos, that if you bring, it's the whole premise of NAWRB, where we started the last 5 years, you know, is that you've got to quantify the expertise of each of those buckets into a local community, into the county, into the state, into the Fed, into the globe. Because every country has its own systemic racism issues. Every country has its own Bill of Rights on what they believe in, what they don't believe in. You know, you look at something as simple as the pandemic of the COVID, is
Mhm.
whether I want to be traced, whether I want to wear a mask, whether I want to, how dare you tell me I can't leave my home.
Mhm.
And then you add all the different layers on top of that, and whether we're going to publicize something or not. We have to say, remove the noise. What's in this bucket or silo?
Mhm.
Who's in charge of that community and that government and that
Yeah,
evolution, right?
you have to figure out who the players are,
Yeah,
right? Like in terms of, because the hierarchy is very clear to see, right? So you have those who are building the laws, people who are, you know, asking for your campaign dollars to be put into office, places of office.
every night. It's okay.
Right.
They
So
call.
but then there's the rung below them, right?
Right.
And the rung below them has just as much power as those people. And they're the ones who are actually, you know, going into the president's here and saying, hey, can you deregulate that oil so we can make a bunch of, you know, some extra money over here?
Right.
Okay, sure, John. You know, so these are, so that you need to actually, perfect example is COVID, you know, because how COVID happened, where everyone around the globe is trying to figure out how to find the cure,
Mhm.
right? So you have the greatest minds from all around the world who know the data. They've compiled the data. Now everyone's trying to figure out what we can do to rectify what we've come to understand. And it's the same premise that we have to do now in terms of reimagining and re-envisioning what this country, and I mean, I think big. I'm a big person. I solve big problems. So like, I'm also looking at this from a global perspective, because if we're able to be successful in creating a template,
Absolutely.
then
I,
this is, and that's ultimately the goal, right? The goal is to create a substantial, viable template for each siphon.
mhm.
And then you also make sure that you have, part and parcel to all of that, leaders of color who are the best in the nation or wherever they are, and really understanding what these pieces mean. You know, we have to
Got
work
it.
together, where they've got to be in the room.
Yeah. No,
They
and
have to
that,
be,
well,
they have to be,
we'll call it a call. We'll call it a, you know, they're in the room virtually now, but go ahead.
right, yeah, exactly. They have to be present. Like that's the whole part of this, is that we've been shut out of governing ourselves. We've been shut out of being able to actually create safety and welfare for ourselves. So the first thing that has to happen right now is that we have to be in the room so that we understand how to make it happen across the board, and make sure that it's to the standard that is necessary for us to be safe.
You know what? That's a perfect way to segment this, is that the end game is to be safe, to build to be successful, and to embrace the same fortitude of quality of life, right?
Yeah.
And if you think at rule 4, to close it out, you said be ready for a fight. And I'd like to add a couple things that you have regarding the how to sign up, how to be part of the things that you've done. So take a few minutes to close it out, to talk about be ready for a fight and what you've been doing with the Sacramento Bee, the SAC Bee that just came out, and your campaign to move this forward.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, I've been doing a lot of talking.
That's okay. We're way past our time limit, but that's good.
But you know, ultimately what this is so when I was finally ready to roll it out, I was working with the Sacramento Bee to publish an op-ed that I had created to bring some perspective to, and some context to, what the Black Bill of Rights is, what it can be. And so out of that, we kind of had a lag on that. So then I created the petition. And so the petition has become important because of who the petition is geared towards. The petition is geared towards Kamala Harris. And so it was a strategic thing to do, because one, we know that she's on the short list to become VP.
Okay.
as much as I love Kamala, she is quite controversial within the Black community. A lot of Black community members and leaders feel as though she hasn't done enough for Black people. And you know, being in the rooms that I'm in, I have come to understand that Black people don't really trust her. You know, so there is a definite connection to tapping her as the person to get this petition, because I think that she needs something to be able to sink her teeth into.
Got it.
She needs something that's going to give you know, a light to Black folks of this nation and say, you know what, I know that my past was, you know, problematic. There are things that we've done that's problematic. Everybody has, you know, if you're in politics, you've done something problematic. That's just what it is. You know what I mean? That's the sausage being made, you know? But I think, yeah, but I think that, you know, she could benefit from actually having something to endorse that could also potentially be in the hands of the president, you know, because that changes a lot of this. It makes things a lot more easier to kind of like steer. But the best part about what I think about the Black Bill of Rights is that you can really do this on a local level. Strategically speaking, we can completely sidestep the federal government and really look to make these shifts and changes on a local level. So now we're really creating a strong grassroots movement. You know, we're at the precipice of being able to, you know, it's not just like all these different factions kind of fighting and, you know, trying to get their bills passed in their towns. This is about Black people understanding that this is not a conversation necessarily about just legislation and policy. This is about the fact that we have had nothing but bad actors who have not had our best interest in mind for 400 plus years, and they've never done anything to rectify it. And we've never been in a position to rectify it ourselves. And I think that now we are. I think that this is our moment in history to put white supremacy on notice. This is our time in our history where Black people can finally see that we are worth it. We're worth being able to feel safety in our homes, that we shouldn't have to be afraid to walk outside or to take a jog or to wear a hoodie, because that's what this takes. We need allies to understand that every time we look at a Skittle bag, we think of Trayvon.
Yeah.
Every time we see someone who's selling, you know, selling cigarettes on the side of the road, and that's something that's so common in cities. These are the things that we think about. Running, every single thing, dancing while Black, running while Black, driving while Black. Every time we step into a car, every time I step into a car, I am nervous, because I never know if that's going to be the day where the police are going to follow me, and God forbid I forget to turn on my turning signal. But I don't do that actually anymore, because you know what? Ever since Sandra Bland, I make sure that for every single thing, I even do a turning signal when I go into my house. This is how we live.
Yeah, no,
we live like scared animals and have to constantly be put into this position where we have to over analyze what we do in every instance, because that could be the last time.
Well, the amount of energy, the amount of given the environment right now, if you look at just the COVID, to be put in that place to where you have to go to the store and, you know, do you have the gloves on? Do you have hand sanitizer? Do you have the gloves? Do you have this? Did that person walk in out with a glove and someone's not gonna let him in? And are you gonna expose yourself? And then to think that you have to get into a car and not have the fear of turning a hand signal. Did you do everything 100%? And did you overcompensate that you did it perfectly? Yet you hit someone at a bad moment because they're having a bad day, because there's not a single person in the world that does not have a bad hour, bad minute, or bad day that they wake up and they're just in not a good mood. Yeah. And you hit them in the wrong place. You have judges, you know, you have people that are the best intentions, and they might smirk or say something or do something that they weren't thinking. They just did it just because they were not on guard. And yet you're telling me that every single second your four walls are your allowability to let your guard down. But look at Breonna Taylor. She was in bed in her own home.
Asleep.
Yeah, and oh yeah, we're so yeah, so I get you loud and clear, and I am so thankful that we met, and the future is bright in what we're doing, and bringing this to the table, because I believe that even if not everyone believes that everything we discussed today, at least you got your heart and soul into the thought, the process, the integration of understanding. The more you know, the better you can educate, and the better you can help train your children, and the better you can help the people that you live with. Because the old adage is that if there's a fire happening with your neighbor and you had a fight with your neighbor, you sure better help your neighbor, because the bottom line is you don't want your house to burn down.
Exactly.
Like you said, to the point is that, it might be that the rules of 3/5 happened because the fact is that it wasn't to help the blacks, but it was to help the white to go with the black. Well, help your neighbor save their house from burning down. So I hear you loud and clear, and I think this is fantastic. So again, let's sum up. We have rule number 1, educate yourself. Rule number 2, be solution oriented. Rule number 3, believe in the realm of possibility. And rule 4, be ready for a fight. So how do we get a hold of Jasper? How do we help you help with the Black Bill of Rights?
Well, I mean, like I said, it's out in the world right now. We are currently in our 2nd week of rollout, and so I'm having a lot of these similar conversations with other people. So I think that that's the really important part, because it's so conceptual.
Yeah.
That it is important for people to really understand the concept and the premise of the concept. The premise of the concept is that the systems in place are meant to keep us oppressed. And that because of that, we are scared. And the fact is that they know that we're scared, and they want to keep us afraid, because the white supremacist culture in and of itself never saw us as human to begin with. And I really want non-Black individuals to really truly understand this, because this is the point, and it's hard to hear. It's hard to hear that you have to understand that policing was created to treat us like animals. It was created so that it could take our freedom away. They were there to police us, and then they had the right to kill us, because that was part of policing. Part of policing and part of being white was the ability to police Black lives. That's the reason why you see people in the park being like, "You're not supposed to be selling that water," because that's something that has always been in white culture. White culture was based on the premise that we're not human, and that you have the ability and the right to police us whenever you want. And so that's part of the reason why the action item number 3, believe in the realm of possibility, is so important, because it's not just us having to believe in it, because in order for us to be able to reimagine this in a way that's like worth it and healthy and nurturing, we have to be able to believe in the realm of possibility, and we have to have our kids understand that they have to be able to think in the realm of possibility. That's so crucial, because they have nothing to go on.
Right. Well,
we don't have anything to go on. We don't know what that world looks like. The first time we ever saw kind of that world is in the Black Panther.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing that stuck with me.
That was a fantastic movie.
It was the way that they actually perceived Blackness and living as a Black person without having the baggage of knowing that the people who are governing you have been governing you like you are an animal. And I want to make that really clear. So when you're gearing up for the fight, the fight comes down to the education, standing up to your local leaders. And how you do that is you support the petition, sign the petition, post it, share it, donate to it so that it gets further reach. I mean, these are the things for that.
It's back to, I think, number one in everything we're doing right now. To sum this all together, is education, education, education. The more you know, the more you can pick and choose what you believe in and get it done. And I believe that as a society, we'll be better if we're all better educated. And that believes in all different avenues. So I want to thank you. I know Jasper, you're on LinkedIn, and the activism articulation is so fantastic. I know I gotta get together.
They could find us. They could find us at activismarticulated.com.
There you go.
Activismarticulated.com. They want to reach us. They can reach us through there.
Activismarticulated.com.
Yes.
That's a whole mouthful. Anyway, so thank you everyone for listening to us. I'm Desirée Patno, your host of Know the Rules of the Game. Again, that's NAWRB.com. We're here every Wednesday for 8 a.m. to bring you another special. We're going to have Liz Tumulty, who's going to be the former CBS president. And also we're going to have future guests that are going to really dive deep, because this is the value add of knowing the rules, is that everything that Jasper brought today, there's so much I did not know any of it. And the more that we can help educate everyone in the housing ecosystem, anything touches land. So you talk about marine life, you talk about technology, you talk about the integration of public policy from a local, city, county, state, and federal level and global level. It is so powerful. So thank you. I appreciate your time, Jasper. And stay tuned for our next podcast, and we'll go from there. So thank you again, Jasper. All right, you take care. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye-bye.